The first signs of trouble came as streaks of light in the sky, sharp and deadly, cutting across Elira's twin suns. At first the people thought it was a meteor shower, something beautiful and harmless, but the truth was far worse. Commander Mira Solon stood on the observation deck of the Illyrian citadel, her eyes fixed on the horizon where ships erupted into fire. Each streak of light was a vessel destroyed, each explosion a warning that their peace was over. Elira had always been a world of harmony. Its oceans sparkled under the sun, forests stretched endlessly across the continents, and humans and Valari, the tall, crystal-skinned aliens, lived together in careful balance. But that balance was shattering. Behind her, the doors slid open and Captain Darius Kane entered. His armor was scorched, dust and blood streaked his face, and yet he moved with calm purpose. Mira turned to him, trying to find hope in his expression, but she found only the seriousness of a man who had seen too much destruction. "They've broken the defense grid," he said simply. His words carried weight, more than any explosion or alarm could. The Corral were coming, and they were unstoppable. The Corral were not like anything Elira had faced before. Their six-limbed bodies were covered in black biometal armor, glinting in the sunlight like liquid steel. They moved quickly, striking without hesitation, and left nothing but fire and smoke in their path. Mira swallowed hard. She had read about alien wars, about invaders that crushed planets without mercy, but seeing it firsthand was different. It was terrifying and yet strangely mesmerizing. Darius's presence steadied her. He didn't panic, didn't flinch. He was ready. Mira felt a strange mix of fear and admiration as she watched him. The humans had come to Elira seeking alliance and friendship, but now they were called to defend it. Darius turned to her, his gaze meeting hers, and she understood something important. The Corral didn't just want to conquer Elira. They wanted to erase it. Every explosion in the sky, every burning ship was a reminder of what was at stake. And yet, despite the overwhelming odds, Darius's stance showed no surrender. Elira must not fall, Mira whispered, almost to herself. He nodded, a small, determined movement that seemed to carry the weight of the entire human fleet. "Then we'll hold the line. Together." His words felt like a promise, not just to the planet or to the Valari, but to her personally. Mira's hand reached for his without thinking, grasping it in a silent gesture of trust and connection. In that moment, she realized she had allied herself to a human for peace, hoping to maintain harmony between worlds. But peace was slipping through their fingers like water. The enemy was relentless, and the human spirit, fiery and unyielding, was the only shield they had. The observation deck shook as another explosion lit the horizon, sending a wave of heat and light across the city. Mira held Darius's hand tighter, feeling his resolve anchor her own. She knew then that survival would not come from diplomacy or negotiation. It would come from courage, ingenuity, and the unbreakable will of humanity. Somewhere deep inside, she felt a spark of hope. If humanity could rise in the face of this firestorm, perhaps Elira had a chance. And if Darius Kane could stand unyielding against the impossible, then maybe she could too. The war had begun, and there was no turning back. The remnants of the human fleet moved cautiously through the black void of space, their hulls scarred from the relentless attacks. Only 7 ships remained from the original 40, and each one carried the weight of countless lives. The largest, the ESS Resolute, led the formation, its engines burning steadily as if defying the darkness around it. Inside, Captain Darius Kane stood on the bridge, eyes scanning every blip on the tactical screens. The crew worked in tense silence, their faces pale but determined, hands moving quickly across controls as they launched countermeasures and tracked incoming threats. Beside him, Commander Mira Solon watched the stars outside, her heart tight with fear and awe. Even from a distance, she could see the devastation the Corral had wrought. Entire sections of the Illyrian fleet had been obliterated in a single strike, leaving trails of smoke and twisted metal drifting silently through space. The Valari had tried to fight back. Their crystalline ships glimmered like jewels against the void, firing energy beams that cut through enemy hulls with precision. But their defenses were failing. Their great war crystals, which had stood for centuries, now lay in shards across the battlefield. The humans were the last line of defense, and though their numbers were few, they carried the fierce determination of a species that refused to surrender. Mira's hand rested briefly on Darius's arm, feeling the steady strength he radiated. His calmness was unnerving but also inspiring. Every decision he made, every command he gave, carried the certainty of someone who had faced impossible odds and chosen to fight anyway. Suddenly, alarms blared across the bridge. The tactical officer shouted over the noise, pointing at a massive Corral dreadnought approaching from the distance. It moved with terrifying speed, its black armor glinting with reflected light from distant explosions. "Harrowfang," the officer whispered, almost as if saying the name aloud could summon doom. Darius's jaw tightened. The ship was enormous, its weapons capable of destroying the Resolute in a single blast. Yet he did not hesitate. "Target their ventral power core," he commanded. "Full-spread torpedoes. Fire on my mark." The crew scrambled, loading torpedoes and preparing the ship's energy cannons. Mira's stomach clenched. She had seen the destructive power of the Corral up close, and now they were aiming directly at them. The torpedoes launched, streaking through the void like falling stars. For a brief moment it seemed as if the humans might succeed. A massive explosion blossomed across the Corral dreadnought's hull, sending shards of metal spinning into space. But the enemy pressed forward, barely slowed, cutting through debris and striking at the Resolute with precision and fury. The bridge shook violently with each impact, sparks flying from damaged consoles. Mira stumbled, nearly falling, but Darius caught her effortlessly. His strength was calm and controlled, a stark contrast to the chaos around them. She looked up at him, seeing not just a man, but a force that refused to break. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Why do you fight like this, Darius?" "Even when it seems impossible?" He met her gaze, and a faint, grim smile appeared on his face. "Because we're human," he said simply. "When the universe says we can't win, we make sure it's wrong." His words settled in her chest like fire, filling her with a mixture of fear, pride, and hope. Even here on the edge of defeat, humanity refused to bow. Every maneuver, every shot, every decision was a testament to their strength, their ingenuity, and their will to survive. As the battle raged on, Mira realized something profound. This fight was not just for Elira, not just for survival. It was for the right to exist, for the proof that humans could endure what no one else could. And in the heart of that chaos, Darius Kane stood like a beacon, calm, fierce, unyielding. For all the destruction and fear surrounding them, humanity still had a chance. And if they could survive this, perhaps Elira would live to see peace again. The Corral descended on Elira like a storm of darkness and fire. Their massive ships blotted out the twin suns, casting the world into a dim, eerie light, even at midday. From orbit, the destruction was total. Cities melted under streams of plasma, forests burned to ash, and rivers boiled under the intense heat. The Valari, once proud and serene, retreated underground, leaving their cities vulnerable. The people of Elira ran, screaming as buildings crumbled and towers of crystal shattered into fragments that rained down like deadly rain. Commander Mira Solon gripped the controls of her shuttle with trembling hands, her eyes wide as the chaos unfolded beneath her. Beside her, Captain Darius Kane piloted with precision, weaving between collapsing spires and burning debris. Every turn, every maneuver was calculated, yet each second brought them closer to death. The shuttle shuddered violently as a plasma strike passed too close, scorching the hull and sending sparks flying across the cabin. Mira pressed herself against the seat, gasping. Around them, the evacuation fleet moved like a fragile line of fireflies, each craft carrying civilians or soldiers, trying desperately to escape the apocalypse. Communication with Elira's orbital command was lost. Static filled the comms as the Corral jammed every channel. Darius's jaw tightened, his focus unwavering even in the face of this terror. He guided their shuttle through narrow canyons of collapsing rock, his hand steady, his mind sharp. Mira realized that despite the odds, despite the fear, there was no hesitation in him, only determination. Finally, they reached the Crystal Veil, an ancient Valari temple carved into the cliffs. It glowed faintly with a blue light that seemed almost alive, a remnant of old magic and science intertwined. The temple offered shelter, but it was not a fortress. Darius landed the shuttle on a jagged plateau, helping civilians and soldiers alike to safety. Mira stepped out beside him, the acrid smell of smoke and burned metal filling her lungs. She looked around at the fleeing Valari and human refugees, the fear and despair in their eyes mirrored in her own heart. This was not just survival. It was the desperate fight to protect life itself. Darius surveyed the approaching Corral forces, their six-limbed forms advancing with terrifying coordination. Mira could feel the tension radiating from him, but it was not fear. There was something else there, something deeper, ancient, and powerful. He drew his weapon, a hybrid human Valari energy rifle, and checked its systems with practiced ease. Mira tried to stop him. "We can't hold them all, Darius. There's too many of them." Her voice was almost drowned by the roar of alien engines. He turned to her, eyes blazing. "Then we make this stand count," he said simply, the weight of the world behind his words. He touched her hand lightly, a fleeting moment of tenderness amid the chaos. "Stay alive. Make sure they remember what humanity is capable of." And then he stepped forward alone, moving into the open as the corral closed in. Mira's breath caught in her throat. She had allied herself with him for peace, hoping to maintain balance and understanding between humans and the Valari. But now peace seemed impossible. The only thing that could fight the coming storm was the fire burning inside this man. The first corral struck, leaping forward with terrifying speed. Darius met them head-on, firing, dodging, and striking with deadly precision. Sparks flew as alien claws met armor, energy beams cut through the air, and the ground shook under the impact of their confrontation. Mira watched in awe and horror as the man she had married for peace became a whirlwind of fury. The calm, calculating Captain Kane transformed into something larger than life, something the Valari whispered about in legends. A force of nature, a protector that seemed more divine than human. Even as Elira burned around them, hope flickered in Mira's chest. She realized that this was the moment that would define humanity, and the courage of one man could turn the tide of destruction. Darius's fight was no longer just his own. It was the fight of every human, every Valari, every being desperate to survive against an enemy that seemed unstoppable. Night had fallen over Elira, though the darkness was pierced by the fires of battle that still raged across the surface. The Corral forces continued their relentless advance, moving with a precision that seemed almost mechanical. Commander Mira Solon and the surviving refugees huddled within the glowing crystal caverns of the Veil, the walls pulsing with a soft, otherworldly blue light. The cavern offered shelter, but it could not stop the screams and roars of war echoing from outside. Mira pressed her back against the crystalline wall, feeling the trembling of the ground beneath her. Her hands were clammy, and her heart pounded so loudly that she feared it might give her position away. Outside, explosions shook the cliffs, and the smell of burning metal and scorched earth filled the air. Darius Kane stood at the entrance of the cavern, facing the swarm of corral that had begun to surround them. The alien creatures moved like shadows, six limbs cutting through the air with terrifying speed. Each one carried weapons that burned with an unnatural energy, capable of tearing through armor as if it were paper. Mira tried to reach him, calling out, "Darius, you can't fight them all. You'll be killed!" But even as the words left her lips, she could see in his stance that he had already made up his mind. There was no retreat, no hesitation. His eyes, usually steady and calm, now burned with a fierce light, a resolve that made her blood run cold and hot at the same time. He turned to her, and for a brief moment, the man she loved softened. His hand reached out, brushing against her cheek. "Stay alive," he said, his voice low but carrying across the cavern. "Make sure they remember humanity." The words sent a chill through her, for she understood the meaning. He was going to stand alone, against impossible odds. And yet there was no fear in his eyes, only determination, only fury. The first wave of corral charged, claws striking, weapons firing. Darius moved like a force of nature. His rifle flared with energy, cutting through enemy armor as if it were nothing. He twisted, leaped, and struck with precision, each movement fluid, almost supernatural. The cavern trembled under the impact of his blows. Mira could hardly keep track of him. He was everywhere at once, a whirlwind of light and fire. The Valari survivors whispered among themselves, awestruck. They had stories of warriors who could channel the power of the stars, but they had never seen it like this. Then, Darius pressed a hand against his chest, activating the Aegis core, a human Valari hybrid device designed for extreme combat. Energy spread across his armor in bright veins of white and gold, and a hum of power filled the air. His eyes glowed and his movements became faster, sharper, unstoppable. Mira watched in a mixture of fear and admiration as he became something more than human, a being of pure fury and light. Each strike he made decimated the corral that dared approach. Their numbers were many, but he was faster, stronger, and smarter than anything they had faced. From orbit, the surviving human ships responded. Darius's actions seemed to signal them, as if his fury guided their weapons. Torpedoes streaked down like shooting stars, hitting enemy dreadnoughts and shattering them in blinding flashes. Explosions lit the night sky, reflecting in the crystal walls of the veil. Mira could hear the distant roar of engines and the screams of the corral as Darius moved through their ranks, a force impossible to stop. As the night dragged on, Darius never faltered. Every moment he fought, every enemy he destroyed, strengthened the hope that humanity could endure. Mira felt tears streaming down her face, not from fear but from the awe of what she was witnessing. The man she had married for peace had become a symbol of war and protection, a beacon of light in a galaxy consumed by darkness. Humanity was not just surviving. It was rising, and in that rise, Darius Kane had become something that would be remembered forever. The final battle began under a sky filled with fire and smoke, the twin suns of Elira barely visible behind the haze of destruction. The massive Corral dreadnought, the Harrowfang, hovered above the plains like a dark mountain, its weapons glowing with deadly energy. Every cannon could obliterate entire cities in a single shot, and the ground shook beneath its presence. Commander Mira Solon and the surviving refugees watched from the crystal veil, hearts hammering with fear. She could see the tiny specks of human ships swarming around the massive vessel, missiles streaking toward it, laser fire illuminating the darkness. But even as they attacked, it was clear that the Harrowfang would not fall easily. Darius Kane stood at the forefront, his armor battered and scorched from hours of continuous battle. His rifle lay at his side and his hands trembled slightly, though his expression was unwavering. Mira reached him, grabbing his arm. "Darius, you can't do this alone. There's too much firepower. You'll be killed!" she shouted over the roar of engines and the hum of alien energy weapons. He turned to her, eyes glowing faintly from the energy of the Aegis core, a device now fused into his armor. His face was calm, almost serene, though the glow made him seem larger than life. "There's no retreat for humanity." "Mira, not today," he said, his voice carrying over the chaos, steady and commanding. He lifted the Aegis core to his chest, the veins of energy spreading across his body like molten light. The device pulsed and hummed, building energy that seemed capable of tearing the very fabric of space. Mira realized with horror and awe that he intended to collapse it into a singularity, a blast powerful enough to destroy the Harrowfang. But it would also destroy him. "Darius, no! You can't!" she screamed, tears streaming down her face. His hand touched hers briefly, a final, fleeting connection filled with love and resolve. "For peace," he whispered. "For you." The humans in Valari watched in stunned silence as Darius stepped forward. The Harrowfang fired its massive cannons, beams of pure energy slicing through the sky, but they struck nothing. Darius moved with impossible speed, dodging and weaving through the blasts, a living storm of light and fury. Every step he took left trails of energy, and every strike he made tore through the Corral soldiers and machinery. It was as if the battlefield itself obeyed him, bending to his will. The Corral hesitated, confused and fearful of a single human capable of such destruction. Then the core detonated. A blinding flash of white and gold filled the sky, stretching across miles of space and atmosphere. The Harrowfang was engulfed in the explosion, its massive body ripped apart in a cascade of fire and metal. The blast waves rolled across the surface of Elira, knocking down the remaining enemy forces and sending shockwaves through the mountains. When the light faded, the dreadnought was gone, reduced to nothing but fragments that drifted silently into the void. Darius Kane's body was nowhere to be seen, swallowed by the brilliance of his final act. Mira fell to her knees, exhausted and grieving, but also filled with awe. Around her, the surviving humans in Valari slowly emerged from the shadows, their faces reflecting disbelief and hope. The enemy had been defeated, not by numbers or overwhelming technology, but by courage, ingenuity, and the unyielding will of one human. Elira had survived because of him. His sacrifice had saved thousands of lives and ensured that humanity's spirit would live on. In the silence after the storm, Mira whispered his name, feeling both loss and pride. The night sky seemed calmer now, the stars shining with a quiet brilliance that felt like a tribute. Humanity had endured the impossible, proving that even against a seemingly unstoppable foe, courage and determination could turn the tide. Darius Kane had become more than a man. He had become a symbol, a living legend, and the ultimate proof that when humanity fought, it could rise like gods. Months had passed since the battle, and Elira was beginning to breathe again. The fires that had consumed cities and forests were gone, replaced by quiet rebuilding. The survivors, both human and Valari, worked side by side to repair homes, rebuild infrastructure, and restore the land. Nature itself seemed to be healing, rivers flowing gently once more, and forests regrowing where ash had fallen. Yet, amid this renewal, there was a weight that no amount of reconstruction could lift. Darius Kane was gone, his sacrifice still fresh in the hearts of those who had witnessed it. Commander Mira Solon walked through the recovering city, her footsteps slow and deliberate. She could hear the hum of work, the laughter of children cautiously returning to play, and the quiet conversations of neighbors who had survived impossible odds. Everything looked ordinary, peaceful even, but beneath that calm lay the echo of loss. Mira approached the Crystal Vale, where a monument had been erected in Darius's honor. Crafted from fused crystal and metal, it shone softly in the sunlight, a tribute not only to the man but to the courage and spirit he represented. She placed a hand on its surface, feeling the warmth of the crystal beneath her fingers. The people of Elira had gathered there as well, Valari elders, human soldiers, refugees, each person silently paying respect. Stories had already begun to spread about what had happened during the final battle. The Valari whispered the name Darius Kane with reverence, calling him the human who became divine fire. Children listened wide-eyed as the elders recounted how one man had faced an enemy no army could hope to defeat, and in doing so had saved their world. Mira closed her eyes, remembering his last moments, the white light, the blast that had destroyed the Harrowfang, and the faint smile he had given her before stepping into danger. She could still feel his presence in her heart, a steady warmth that carried both grief and pride. He had fought for peace even through fire and death, and that courage had become a beacon for everyone around him. Humanity had endured because of that courage, and Elira had survived. She knew that his sacrifice would never be forgotten, not in history, not in memory, and not in the hearts of those who remained. Even as rebuilding continued, the galaxy remembered. Messages and news from other worlds arrived, recounting the victory and the heroism of humans. They spoke of courage, determination, and the ability to rise against overwhelming odds. Darius's act became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even when a species seemed small and fragile, it could achieve greatness through will and ingenuity. Mira saw this reflected in the children playing in the streets, in young soldiers training with renewed energy, and in the Valari who once doubted humanity's strength. A legacy had been forged in fire, one that would inspire generations. Mira lingered at the monument as the sun began to set behind the cliffs. The light glinted off the crystal, casting a golden glow across the faces of those who had come to honor him. She whispered his name, feeling both sorrow and gratitude. "You promised me peace, Darius." "And you gave it, in your own way." Though he was gone, his spirit seemed to linger in every corner of Elira, in every act of courage and kindness, in every human and Valari who refused to give up. The galaxy had seen what humans were capable of, and through Darius Kane, it had learned that humanity, fragile yet fierce, could fight like gods when peace was at stake. As night fell, the twin suns dipped below the horizon, leaving Elira bathed in stars. Mira gazed upward, imagining Darius among them, watching over the world he had saved. In the silence that followed, there was a sense of calm, of hope, and of enduring strength. Humanity had survived, and Elira would thrive, a living testament to courage, sacrifice, and the divine fury of one extraordinary man.